This is a video for all zodiac signs on Mercury retrograde. Mercury will be retrograde in the sign of Leo from July 18th, 2025 to August 11th, 2025. Right now we are in this pre-shadow phase. Mercury is making its way to 15 degrees and 34 minutes Leo, where it's going to go retrograde and move backwards through the sign. This is typically a time where people want to push forward, but circumstance and situations may not be very cooperative at this time. In about 3 to 4 days, so around July 14th, we're going to enter into what's called stationary retrograde. And that's when things will really begin to pick up as far as the retrograde is concerned. This is sometimes even tougher than the retrograde. Again, you'll want to push forward, and again, you just can't. This would be what we consider an in-between time. Normally, Mercury is going out into the world, and that's how we gather information. That's how we collect data. But as Mercury begins to slow its motion down and come to this standstill right here at 15 degrees Leo, so too do our lives slow down. But we have all this forward momentum. We've been out in the world working on our goals. We don't want to slow down. We've been in a rhythm. We've been learning. We've been growing. We've been teaching. And that's what Mercury is really about, communication, an exchange of information. And we use this communication to achieve our desires. That's how we decide what we're going to learn, what points of view we're going to take on, and what points of view are actually worth us taking on. If someone hasn't accomplished the things we desire, then we may waste our time in dealing with those people. When Mercury reaches this stationary retrograde point and the rhythms clash, and our rhythm gets disrupted, the more we try to push against this, the more tension we experience. Your best bet is to slow down. You can't slow everything down because you still have things to do. And this is where Mercury retrograde becomes annoying. Here you are in the midst of living all this life, and here Mercury comes in to disrupt it. We have to consider the sign that Mercury goes retrograde in. It goes retrograde 3 times a year. And it goes element by element. So this time, it's hitting the fire trinity. This has made things particularly explosive. During the shadow period that we're in now, as we lead up to stationary retrograde, the 7-day period, 4 days before and 3 days after it goes retrograde on the 18th of July, we're going to start to get hints about what we need to review, about what we need to take another look at. In the midst, we may experience the usual. Cars having trouble, which I've already experienced. The minor annoyances becoming major annoyances. And underneath it all will be this hint. Looking at the whole fire trinity, I know that in Aries, it was about our desires. It was about getting back to our own point of view and being unapologetic about it. We may have had to stand up for ourselves in ways we haven't had to do in years. But this was different than retrograde in Leo. Although the next evolutionary step, Leo represents the role that we play, the role that we base on this point of view that we reestablished in Aries. So we may have fought for ourselves months ago when we had that retrograde in the sign of Aries. And once again, it's time to put our money where our mouth is. As your astrologer, I'm just going to give you the answers. And underneath all this confusion and all this chaos, and the need to review will be your need to be courageous, to play your role, one that actually lights up your heart, because that's what Leo represents. And the hint, hidden beneath all the confusion and the technological breakdowns, will be that from Aries months ago to Leo right now, you've collected a lot of information and data about yourself. If you did the work in Aries, and you started to live more in line with your desires, then this is kind of the next test. But a test is really only to make sure that you learned the information. It's not about getting a grade or being put through something tough. It's just about knowledge. In Mercury is trying to give you self-awareness. And 3 times a year it goes retrograde in the same element, in this case fire, so that you can work on these parts of yourself. You can shore them up. Aries was the beginning of the fire trinity. And now, in Leo, there may be a lot of stress and confusion about what roles you need to play. Of course, in Leo, there is the ex-lovers coming back. the new relationships that just don't last after Mercury goes direct. Not that they can't, but a lot of times they don't. Or the breakup with other people that just doesn't quite take because you broke up with them during retrograde when you weren't really sure and you really shouldn't have been coming to a decision. And so you have to understand it's just about slowing down and starting to switch rhythms, just to realize that you're going into a more reflective period, but not for no reason. What you're going to reflect on here is, are the roles that you're playing serving you? Are the roles that you're playing for others actually aligned with your heart's desires, which we rediscovered in Aries? Do you have the courage to stand up to everybody else, to go your own way? These are the questions that Mercury retrograde and Leo are going to start to ask. And slowing down and being mindful of that is part of the process. The ex coming back really is a question of, has that role that you played with them fulfilled you? Maybe an ex coming back reminds you of parts of yourself you left behind that were actually beneficial to you. And they reawaken those parts by re-entering your life. It doesn't mean that they have to stay forever. It just means that by them re-entering your life, by rediscovering that romance, you may rediscover a part of yourself that existed that was beneficial for you when you were 17 and now you're 40. Sometimes that's why the old flame walks in. Sometimes it is to rekindle something that should have been, that can be now because the timing is right. But besides the point, all I want you to do between July 14th and about July 21st is to be mindful about the slowing down and to keep your eye on the fact that it's really about the roles that you're playing, sticking to the roles that are aligned with your heart's desire, and being courageous enough to stick with your point of view, all of which we're going to work on throughout the retrograde. As we begin to march towards August 11th, we have a very critical point. That'll be on July 31st, 2025. That's really the beginning of this whole Mercury phase. The reason that 7/31/25 is so important is because that is when the sun enters Leo as Mercury is going back towards the sun. And there is a conjunction point. We call this the inferior conjunction. This is the first of two conjunctions between Mercury and the sun. This is sort of the new beginning point. As you're reviewing, you want to be mindful of the fact that this is 1 out of the 3 weeks, or 10 out of the 21 days until the inferior conjunction happens. The reviewing is necessary because Mercury is about collecting information. But at some point, that information sort of has to stand trial. At some point, we have to decide whether we've collected is serving us or hindering us. We have to weed through it and come to a judgment. So we collect the data on our desires, and then we apply it to our values, Taurus, and we get to the heart of our truth by learning about how to achieve our values in Gemini, and then we begin to listen to our feelings and nurture ourselves in Cancer. And then all of a sudden, here we are in Leo, and now we have to say, okay, based on all this, I have a role to play that's going to achieve me this Sagittarian dream, which is coming up at the next retrograde, right? When Mercury enters Sagittarius. So you're not being held up for no reason. You're held up for a review. The review is to reach a judgment. The judgment should be suspended until the end of Mercury retrograde. Okay? Just like those of you who've watched Camp Rock till the end of Final Jam. Yeah, this thing. We're suspending this till the end. It doesn't mean we're not going to have a judgment. It doesn't mean we're not going to have a concert. It's just going to be at the end of Final Jam. It's going to be at the end of Mercury retrograde. Come the 11th, that's when we're going to have all the clarity. Now, clarity starts to creep in around this July 31st time frame. So we're holding this information in review. We're realizing that what's coming into our lives and what's happening right now is helping us define a better role for us that's more aligned with our heart's desire. Something that actually lights us up, gets us in touch with our gut instinct, makes our life fun again, right? It's summertime, it's fun time, and it needs to light up our heart. So now we have a sort of a sense of purpose. Doesn't mean you don't have fun, doesn't mean you don't have love, doesn't mean things don't come into your life. Just don't take them as if they're the be-all, end-all until Mercury retrograde ends and you have some more clarity. Now you start to get an idea about, sort of a hint at the decisions to come and the seeds for the future once you reach this inferior conjunction point on July 31st. And like I said, that's when the Sun and Mercury come together in the sign of Leo, and they will at 7:28 p.m. Eastern Time, and it's going to be great. That's the first thing you look for. That's when some of the fog begins to clear, but not all of it. And you should still hold off the decision-making process. This is why they say don't sign documents, don't do anything, because you need to take the full time to reach a clear judgment. You have to think of yourself like the jury at this time. And everything presented to you during a retrograde is sort of a review about the sign in question where Mercury is. But then it's all coming, all the things of that sign, which is in one of your houses, which I won't know that I don't have your birth time or your birth chart, but there would be houses. And in one of these houses would be an area of your life. And if Leo was, let's say, on your 10th house cusp, this would have a lot to do with your career and the social status that you were trying to do, and how you to have more fun and be more playful and step fully into a role or a career that really lights you up inside, whatever that may be. And the information provided, you should reach a judgment by the end about how to be courageous in following that. But until August 11th, until we reach that, what would be called stationary direct phase, direct meaning Mercury is slowing down to move forward, where before it was slowing down to move backward. So the first shadow period started on June 30th, 2025, and it ends when Mercury goes retrograde, or reaches stationary retrograde a few days before. From July 31st till August 11th, you really want to stick to your guns. Leo's about strength, and in this case, the strength would be the ability, or rather the definition of strength is the ability to resist attack, right? But the attack to Leo is an attack to who you are. The roles that you play are the things that help you achieve your dream. If a role is not serving your dream, then you need to change it. Changing roles is a powerful tool for Leo at the times when a role no longer fits to achieve the dream. A role is only as good as its ability to achieve the dream and its ability to bring fulfillment to you when playing it. For all the rest of us, we all have Leo somewhere in our chart, and we all need to use these principles. From the inferior conjunction until Mercury goes direct, you will get lots of clarity. Things will become more clear. You may get more excited to push forward. Still, till Mercury goes direct, no final judgment should be made. Once we reach the stationary direct phase, which I'll just put as SD, so August 8th and August 14th, that's your stationary direct phase. Energy sort of builds, and then bam, all of a sudden it releases after this August 11th point, and things start to begin, but really they start to pick up probably a few days after. That's when you can sign the documents, make the decisions, but something else happens. You must also make serious commitment, because we enter the second shadow period, which doesn't end until August 25th. And the second shadow period is where Mercury retraces all the steps. So it goes from 15 degrees of Leo to 4 degrees of Leo. When it finally turns direct at 4 degrees of Leo, it then has to make its way all the way back to the 15th degree. This retracing of its steps going direct, after it already retraced them going backwards, is the shadow period. Until it gets to that degree, which will happen on August 25th, you need to be ultra committed to the role that you've taken on. You need to be extremely strong and courageous in your stances. You need to be extremely clear about the judgments you made that are going to affect your heart and light you up inside. The roles that you've decided will actually help you achieve your dreams versus the ones that were draining you of your energy, which is what's going to have happened. During this time, you'll discover which roles, which romances, which roles, which friends, which demands were draining you of your energy, where you were acting and yet nothing was being produced. We need to eliminate this drain on your energy. This Mercury retrograde can help you do just that. From August 25th till September 13th, after we leave the shadow period, we continue our march to what's called the superior conjunction. So you stay really strong for this couple weeks coming out until the 25th in your stances. You've gotten rid of what has been draining you because you've exercised better judgment. You did this because you slowed down and you paid attention. You held off making a decision until all the facts were reviewed. The facts that were collected when Mercury was direct. Facts that were reviewed during this Mercury retrograde. And then from the time you get out of the shadow period where you solidified that commitment for the next few weeks until September 13th, when we reach this superior conjunction, that means when Mercury going direct now ends up in a conjunction with the Sun, which was ahead of it, and then it will surpass the Sun again till it reaches a certain point in Sagittarius, and then it will begin its retrograde again, and we will start a whole new Mercury cycle at the inferior conjunction in Sagittarius. If you did the review, if you exercise proper judgment, if you make the commitment coming out off of the back of that, and you remain committed and steadfast in your approach until that superior conjunction point on the 13th of September, that's when you should be able to reap the rewards from that point until the next retrograde. It's not like it stops. It's you'll on the 13th of September, but then obviously we're going to go to Sagittarius season in November before we have this next meal deal. And so this is where you really start to reap the rewards, is the superior conjunction of all this commitment you made that really started at the inferior conjunction. When you started to get a bit of clarity, then Mercury went direct, you made a commitment, and then you had the superior conjunction, and you got a reward from it. And then you collect all that data from all that work that you've done, and then we're going to get to Sagittarius, and then that is when we will have to tackle a different part of the fire trinity and the retrograde that goes along with that. When we'll finally begin to put your desires and your role into a framework that achieves your dreams. But we're not quite there yet, so stay tuned. But that's it. That's what you had to know. Pre-shadow, stationary retrograde, into retrograde, to the inferior conjunction, till Mercury goes direct, or stationary direct, and then you have the superior conjunction. And here, a super commitment during shadow 2, right? During the second shadow. So Mercury retrograde, not so simple. I hope you understand that Mercury is about communication for the sake of learning and teaching, for the sake of achieving the dream, and ultimately achieving one's desires, fulfilling one's desires. When Mercury goes retrograde, all that information that is collected gets reviewed, and we need to take those slowdown period times to exercise better judgment in the area that I'm calling us to, and then we postpone that judgment till Mercury goes direct for good reason, and then we make a clear decision based off of that solid sense of rationality and reason, and the solid that we made, the wisdom that we've exercised, that Mercury's lended to us through a proper review. And then we apply that to a commitment of action based on that judgment, which gets us a reward at the superior conjunction and beyond until the next retrograde. Hope that makes Mercury retrograde in Leo season easier for you. Hope that demystifies it a bit for you. And I hope you understand your step-by-step game plan. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. If you want to look at where this particularly will be affecting you, then you can reach out to me directly, timecrisisastrology.com, and we can book you an appointment and get you rolling.